Okay, so we just got a question on return for continuous tasks and what this is. So yeah, if you're looking at an arbitrary time step, the time steps get smaller and smaller in a continuous task. Basically, we're taking the limit as the time step becomes infinitesimally small. When you do that, you can see that the sum of rewards, if you're summing them, is going to be infinite. It should diverge if you have some reward and an infinite number of small time steps over that time. So this is why we discount the future rewards. So there's going to be some component in a real-time system where you do receive that reward. There's either going to be an event that causes a reward to be triggered at a particular time step. So we're still going to be summing infinitely far in the future, but what causes this to converge is the fact that like the return is going to be our estimate of the rewards that are yet to be seen. So if the process using a continuous task, if we're doing market analysis as an example, and we're looking into the future to say, how should we invest our money in order to maximize future returns? If the market is always returning something that is positive with interest over time, then you would expect the return looking out to infinity to be infinite. If you could live forever and continue to accrue money in the market, then you could eventually, there's no amount of money that you couldn't eventually have. So you could do this, you could either discretize it to something like the days trades and look at each endpoint is the reward that you have at the end of each day. Or you could start to think of something that is continuous and say after some amount of time has elapsed, I'm going to take the cumulative reward that has happened in that time period, and I'm going to apply a more discretized discount factor to it. So after 30 minutes of trades, I'm going to say whatever I think is 30 minutes out, that's 99% as valid as if that same trade were available right now. An hour in the future, that's now 0.99 squared. So we just incorporate the discount factor so that one, the return converges to a real value, and two, that I guess we can think of the problem in terms of how far into the future are those rewards, but the rewards always return to us at a particular point in time. Even if it's updated very, very, very frequently, you can see the sum of those rewards and find a way to discretize it. Just the idea is that the task doesn't end. Yeah.
In terms of like the format of the exam, I'm assuming it's kind of going to be like long answer,
yeah,
kind of thing. You know?
Yeah, there's not a ton of math. I will not have anticipated that people have memorized every formula on these slides. What I want people to know is intuitively, what do those formulas mean or represent? So I will ask any questions that I do ask. It will always be okay for you to respond in English rather than something that is directly mathematical. But you will be incorporating ideas that are disseminated in math. You should understand why and how these ideas work so that you can address them in a problem. So I might have you do something like design a reward. I might have you do something like analyze a game for its reinforcement learning components, the states, the actions, the rewards. What would Bellman-Ford look like? What would the Bellman equation look like for this problem? How does this break down recursively? So just knowing how to read the formula to say, this is how this breaks down in general, now apply it to this problem. You don't have to use the math, but the English that you described should be the idea that the math is trying to disseminate. You've had classes from me before. You probably know a little bit more of what to expect. It'll be a little bit less like software engineering if you've been in a software engineering class with me, and a little bit more like a little bit more like a compilers if you've been in a compilers class. There was a lot more problem solving in compilers though than there will be on this. So kind of a hybrid in that regard, but a lot of the software engineering were closer to short answer, and these will be a little bit more long form. There'll be some design in there and some just conceptual explanation. A lot of when is this relevant? What are the benefits and detriments of applying this idea to this problem? Those kinds of things.
Is it like some of your other exams before where some of them, there might be like a bonus question or it's a total amount of points and then it's
Yeah,
graded out of.
I always do that. Every class, every exam, there's always a more points than it's graded out of. And that's just an anticipation of what the curve is going to look like, so that when you receive an exam back, I don't have to curve the class, and it doesn't feel like most of the class failed in the worst case. You get a score back that is closer to the letter grade that would actually represent after a curve has been applied. And then I tend to adapt that process throughout the quarter. So I make a best guess on a first exam, and then based on how the exam goes, I will decide to weight future exams with a little bit more points, a little bit fewer points, depending on what I need to get the curve about where I want to, so that the curve is embedded in the grades that you receive and not something that happens after the fact. Although I'm still open to doing curves after the fact. But in general, I have found that that's not too needed in this class, especially with the quality of games that I've seen. I anticipate, for the most part, review scores should be relatively high, given the quality of game that I have seen you all develop. It's good stuff. Other questions? I'm also monitoring chat for any of those who are remote. If you have any questions, you can post them to our chat. I don't have sound, so I can't hear if anyone says anything remotely, but you can type your question and I can address it. Anything else I can address from people in class? Yeah.
For exploring stars, is that an on policy method of evaluation, or is that?
Yes, it's on policy. So when we build exploration into the policy, and this is in Monte Carlo, we build exploration into the start. So in order for something like this to converge, for us to know that we have the best process, we need to visit each state action pair an infinite number of times in an infinite run. It can't be that we tune something down. We've now proven that it's suboptimal, so we stop exploring it. We could query it once in a million runs or once in a billion runs, but if you have an infinite number of runs, even something that has probability 1 in a billion of being selected will still be selected an arbitrary number of times. So it forces the probability can't be 0. So what exploring start says is the exploration is where we start the episode. So if we say that we're going to be in a random state facing a random orientation when we start, then we're guaranteed to explore everything, at least from that perspective. It guarantees what the first move is going to be. So each move is going to be selected with some probability based on the exploring starts probability. So no further exploration is needed because it's embedded in the fact that you're starting from this point. Yeah.
But it is part of the policy. It's not like a separate thing from the policy.
Yeah, the policy says when you start, instead of starting at this start location, you would start at a random location. Instead of starting with a default orientation, you would start with a random orientation. So it still uses the concept of generalized policy iteration that we talked about, the determining the value of the policy, then improving the policy, then value of the policy, then improving the policy. It's still going to go through that process, but now we're ensuring that we at least explore everything infinitely. So because of that, we eventually reach it. There is no proof of convergence of this. It won't become necessarily one value, but it will be getting closer and closer to something that is reasonably intelligent.
The difference between exploring starts and self policy will just randomly throughout its learning cycle, just randomly go in a direction. So that's guaranteed it is everything, but exploring starts random position, and that's why it guarantees.
Yeah, your first move, it's kind of like if you're, imagine that you're trying to race from a start to a finish, but your initial orientation, you start at the start line, but your orientation is sideways. So the first step that you take is sideways and not toward the goal. You have to adapt to that and now start running toward the goal after your very first step in the wrong direction. But after that, you would apply the optimized algorithm from there. I think there was some code for this too. Yeah.
Can we just review epsilon stock building?
Yeah. Let's see, where did we, right there. So if we don't use exploring starts, then there has to be exploration in the policy somewhere. Exploration of the policy just means there's a non-zero chance of selecting an action that doesn't seem to be optimal from the perspective of the policy, from our analysis. But because we don't have an infinite sample, there are error bars on the values of any state action pair. We've never proven that what we think is the best is actually the best move in a particular state. So because of that, the soft just says there's a non-zero probability of each action being selected. If there are 4 actions in a state, that means there's at least this soft value of being selected. You could set that soft value at 5%, which says there's at least a 5% chance of each action being picked in a given state, which means 1 in 20 times you're in that state, you're picking that action, as bad as it looks, just to continue to get sample from that. And as you get a larger and larger sample from that, you may change how frequently this is, but the soft places a floor on that value. So it can't go below that soft value. Yeah.
So this kind of a square rectangle thing going on for epsilon gradient, it is an epsilon soft policy.
Yeah.
But there's this square triangle, it's a square rectangle.
That makes sense. Yeah. Epsilon greedy and epsilon soft are very, very similar. It's the same idea, just applied with a floor. Instead of every action being the same, every action has some floor probability of being selected. And that allows us to prioritize the different actions with different probabilities based on how good they look from the sample of data that we have collected. But it forces a certain probability of exploration, which places a bound on how frequently exploration is happening. Does that make sense? Any follow-up questions from that? Any other questions I can address? Yeah.
Why would you use soft policy over exploring starts?
That's a great question. So the question really is down to where is the exploration going to be useful? How quickly do we want this to converge? If we're making one exploratory action for sure in a given run, and then from there we're going to always pick the best action we're going to exploit, you're going to need more runs in order to learn the data because you're only making that one exploratory action. Epsilon soft is kind of a more general way of saying, all right, well, every action, every state that we visit, we're going to have some probability of exploring in. That will learn a lot faster, but it also doesn't necessarily have as high of a threshold of performance at the end of that. If you have exploring starts, you can imagine that every single race, your first step is in a random direction from the start. But after that, your brain kicks in and you go, wait, I should be running toward the exit or running toward the finish line. That's better than randomly during your run, you just decide, instead of moving toward the finish line, I'm going to dart off in a different direction for a bit. You would reach the finish line faster if you had just gone through the exploring start, tried one exploratory value and said, nope, that doesn't get me closer to the finish line. Screw that, I'm just gonna run toward the finish line. But you would learn to run toward the finish line a lot faster if you had exploration built in. You would have a larger sample size to say, every time I deviate from running toward the finish line, I don't finish as quickly. You would learn that a lot faster. If you start wandering off in a different direction, then you're farther away from the finish line. It's going to take you longer to happen upon the finish line and even finish the race the very first time. Because you may not know even the goal of what you're doing. You just have to get to the finish line. You can just be wandering off in a different direction from the finish line for a long time because you initially started off in the wrong direction.
Do you explain this, this formula a little bit? I'm having trouble remembering what the simplest variable is.
Yeah. So this is just according to our policy, the probability that an action is selected, given that we're in a current state. This just says, this is that every action has a certain probability. This is going to be that floor value. So this could be 0.01. We're saying every action has at least a 1% chance of being selected. 0.05, every action has at least a 5% chance of being selected. So if it's, that's just the concept of a soft policy, and epsilon soft policy says every action has at least epsilon over the size of the action space probability of being selected. So here we pick the proportion of time that we want to explore. We want to explore 10% of the time. There are 4 actions that we can take in this state, so that floor becomes 10% over the 4 actions that we can take. Every action has at least a 2.5% chance of being selected. So the epsilon here is just the rate that we want to explore. And so it places a floor on each action, very much like the soft policy, but it guarantees we now have a parameter for how frequently we want to explore in general. So according to the policy, every action that we can pick at a particular state has to have at least that ratio probability of being selected. At least in this case, 2.5% chance of being selected. It could be exactly 2.5%. The worst action possible could be down at that very floor, but every action that might seem better than that might have a value that's higher.
And the state space is always going to be, the size of the state space is always just going to be the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're never looking at the size of the states here, it's always the size of the actions in that state. Yeah, so given that we're in a state, yeah, that's the parameter here. We're passing the state and getting back the action selection. So we may be playing a game where different states have different numbers of actions. And this allows us to take this idea and apply it to an unknown action space if the action space varies from state to state. In this state, I flip a coin. In this state, I choose a random continuous angle between 0 and 360 degrees. Very different state, very different action spaces.
Yeah.
One has 2, one has infinite. Good question so far. What else we got? Yeah.
So for continuous tasks, presumably you can't use before it starts because the task just keeps going. So you have
Yeah.
to export the policy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great conclusion and point, that when something is always ongoing, this is interpreting or thinking that this is going to be episodic, where if for exploring starts, you have to start the episode an infinite number of times. And in a continuous episode, you only ever start once and then it continues forever. So yeah, you would have to build exploration into the policy in order to continue to explore and learn from your actions. Because unless you build a time machine, then you can turn a continuous task into an episodic task. If you do that, let me know. I want in on this project. It sounds lucrative. What I'm hearing is everyone owes about 5 points of their exam to Warren so far, so you should all buy him pizza. Or we can all chip in and buy him a house.
Hold on a second.
We disagree with this. What questions do we have?
Well,
Question in chat. Are there going to be questions like answer the following to the best of your ability? Math. Explain. I don't think I've ever written a question quite like that in my life. If I were tackling something like this, I would say something like, explain the benefits and detriments to using an epsilon soft policy in a particular example, or give me an example when epsilon soft would be a good policy to use for exploration. Justify and let you come up with the reasoning. So you have to understand this, what it means, in order to say, all right, well, there needs to be at least a certain percentage chance that each action is selected. None of that has to do with reading the math. So if I'm designing a question, I don't want reading the math to be the roadblock to your answer. Even if you understand the idea, I don't want you to have to interpret the math to get there. If you understand the idea behind the math, what's going to be on the exam is some kind of English getting at this idea. If you understand it from the math or want to relay the math on the exam, great, I'll know what you're talking about. If you don't, that's also great. I will let your English speak for itself as to whether you know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Just a question, about the wording on this, in this study. It says,
Yeah.
What is exploration versus exploitation? Be able to describe it in English. That's fine. What are some methods to trade off exploration and exploitation? What are the weaknesses? And then finally, how do we handle problems that aren't stationary?
Yeah.
That wording kind of.
Yeah, just the word stationary there.
Yeah.
So that's when the problem is changing over time as we're analyzing. So the example we used was with the slot machines, and you were pulling arms of slot machines, but imagine that the underlying distribution changes every time we play the game. It takes some kind of random walk and changes its properties in some capacity, where it's similar to what it was before you played, but now maybe either the mean shifts to be a little bit higher or a little bit lower, the deviation shifts to be a little bit higher, a little bit lower.
Yeah.
Something like that. So we talked about if the problem were not stationary, it were changing, you'd want to weight the most recent rewards that you got and exponentially decay the rewards that you've gotten further and further in the past. Because they become less and less relevant, they're a distribution that is more and more removed from the current distribution. You want the best estimate that you can of the current value. So you have to trade off the sample size from the history of plays that you have with the relevance of each of those plays to the current distribution's value. Yeah.
This is designed for.
Yeah, I had originally designed this. I'll go verify what I've historically done. But my plan is not to crunch a 2-hour period. So it won't be quite as time crunchy as some other exams and some other classes because we have a little bit more time for it. But yeah, it's designed to I'll keep a full 2 hours regardless, and then I'll fill that remaining hour after the exam with a very fast run to Coffee to pick up some pizza. Does anyone know if Sprague is still closed down there?
It's not closed.
Not closed with a the one lane.
Lane.
Yeah,
Whatever it is.
yeah, there are ways around it. I'm gonna still be using that. Nice. Yeah,
You say more like a compiler's exam, do you just mean more like application, less regurgitation?
yeah. It won't be, my software engineering exams are kind of more on the, here's an idea, closer to define it or closer to show. I don't know, the quizzes, as I call them in that class, are not my favorite design, but they work better in that class or that structure. I feel like, but it'll be closer to the more long-winded, work through something, show when something applies. Kinds of thing.
You're talking about 350.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And yes, the event is happening in this lab. I'll have pizza and drinks set up outside so that we don't eat at the machines and grease up everything. But event in here, food out there, I think is perfectly reasonable.
You're stripping us of what we need to be enter a gamer flow state. I don't know, the community needs. We need to have a slice of pizza on our shirt. Just grease that.
From no grease to a gallon of grease, how good is my game?
Better than.
I guess you can also rate it on a scale of like how likely it's gonna keep you up till 4 AM and make you shake uncontrollably to withdrawals.
Yeah, it's fair. On a scale of a platformer to civilization, from my perspective.
Don't joke about Civ. I've lost so much time in those meetings. Not know how many times it was hilarious playing Civ 6 and getting achievement for nuking someone that's playing India. Look, it's not my fault they're asking for it. And the domination victory was the last one I needed for the achievement. And I had like 4 turns before I would win another way that I didn't want.
I'm sorry I had to fail you. I was just waiting for the achievement of you failed all your students. I had to get that achievement at some point. I'm sorry. I'm sorry it was this quarter.
I'm
I'm on the speed, right? Come on.
You don't want to be in that club.
How am I gonna platinum being a professor if I've never?
Yeah,
I was like, come on, dude. That's messed up.
Presenting on Friday, are we gonna like shift the tables at all, or are we just gonna have people sit in front of a laptop?
I've kind of historically, we're gonna set up these machines. So you'll log into like half a row of these machines and then go to your GitHub on each of them, download it. And then it will be launched and ready to play on each of these machines. So you don't need to bring your own laptops. These have historically worked for every game that has been made in this class. So if your game is the exception, try it beforehand.
How many games are there total? How many teams are there?
7, I want to say.
7. There's.
Yeah, 4 rows.
8,
So half a row would put us at, even if there are 8, half a row is fine. And that way we could have up to what, 5 people playing a particular game at a particular time.
What about sound? Yeah,
They do have sound.
video sound?
Yeah.
What are they?
Oh, yeah, like everyone playing at the same time, playing the.
Oh.
That is a good point.
Personally, I'm pretty proud of the sound design, but I feel like, how many? of you?
5.
Yeah, 5 at the same time. That would be great.
If the sound should hopefully be quiet enough that it is local, the sound is localized. I guess I can ask a question of everybody else as well, which is, are you planning to bring anybody to this event? First of all, are you planning to be there, and are anyone that you're aware of being there? Just as a small piece of the how many pizzas should I get question.
I will be there. I'm trying to gaslight people to coming, but have yet to succeed in that.
Game theory. Find the leverage you have over them and exploit it. This is the time. cash in everything.
It's time.
If everyone gets done with a test, can we set up the computers early? Absolutely. Yeah, I can go bring my magic down, and that way if everyone's set up, then people can be playing magic. They can be, if there are board games that people want to bring, we can set up kind of just have some fun before the event starts.
So
While I go get pizza. Why is it that everyone around me always has fun while I'm doing the annoying work? This is why I should fail you all. I'm kidding. Question.
Like chess.
oh my god.
You just said.
Yeah, people can play anything that's school appropriate.
Alright, that's fair.
Talking like PG-13. My question.
Depends on who's coming. I want it to be family friendly in general. If we,
But
if there's something like that going on, maybe we have a room adjacent to us where that is going. So something that's a little bit less child appropriate.
That's fancy.
How many people literally would show up?
I'm advertising this a little bit better than I have in the past, but historically, I think we've had between 20 and 30 typically come for this.
Well, so we're free to also participate in both that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it would be great if there was one person from your group who was around your games, to be able to answer questions, to give feedback, to interact. But yeah, if there's no one playing your game, or if, yeah, absolutely, we're part of this too. Can people badmouth our games to our face? Sure. I'm not gonna kick them out for doing that, but I mean, we can talk about things like if they say, well, this seems really low quality. Say, we had 4 weeks for this. This is what 4 weeks worth of game design work looks like. Obviously, we're capable of more, but we need a little bit more time. AAA games take a decade to make at the high end, and that's studio of 100 or 200 people working on the game every day. That's a lot of parallelism and a lot of time when we have 3 people. Will there be emotional support available? That's half my job. Have you seen my office hours?
It's kind of cruel, the relationship with compilers that are offered in your office hours.
I can't wait to teach both compilers and algorithms in the same quarter.
It seems like when you go to your office hours for compilers, it's always like half of the session is, oh, let's actually talk about the problem. And then half of the session is, it's okay, like you're good.
I think I have a budding second career in psychology and in therapy if I needed to rely on that. I get a lot of training for how to handle whatever happens in this position. Like, what are your credentials? Was a professor. Oh, okay, well, I completely substitutes for an education.
Is the dog shit team here today?
There's one member.
I can't get your game from on my back.
Oh, shit. That's a you problem.
Yeah, that's you. What happened? I can't get the game to run on my Mac.
Oh, no.
Josh.
Anyways, that's it, guys.
Going through Josh's mind, I knew I couldn't come to class today. This is the day I chose to shout out. Well,
I exported everything, so I don't know why it's not working.
I got full pieces.
that sounds like a good conversation to have at some point. Sounds like we're kind of running dry on questions. Are there anything else I can address while we're looking at it, or are we good for this for now? Yeah.
What kinds of pizza are you gonna be getting?
And there's two.
Yeah, make 2 kinds of pizza, so
Pepperoni.
I tend to try to get about half and half.
Yeah.
If people have a preference for one over the other. They do put more cheese on the cheese pizzas and they put cheese on the pepperoni pizzas. So if you like cheese, the cheese is the right option. I like to take a slice of cheese and a slice of pepperoni, smash them together, and then you have a real slice of pizza.
Gotta hit those protein macros.
Where do we find out, Nathan, how many grams of protein were in the
Slice of Costco pizza, slice of cheese Costco pizza has like
Yeah.
40 grams of protein.
I'm just bulking, okay?
Yes.
I don't need muscles.
It's my macros, okay, I'm on a seafood diet.
Seafood, eat food diet.
Dr. Payne, I'm on a seafood diet.
Yeah, but if you do it like a bone pizza.
And it's fish.
Doesn't matter if it's still breathing. That's what the show Bones should have really been about. Yeah,
Are the doors gonna be unlocked downstairs from 4 to 8?
that would be the goal. I've talked to Bill Barton about it, so I think the doors are going to be unlocked at least until 8. But I'll verify that beforehand, and otherwise, someone's gonna get the really boring job of letting people in. It may be that you still need a card to get entry. Or you probably will need a card to get entry. So people who are coming, if they're people you know, you may have to go let them in. Otherwise, yeah, just someone bring a card with you. Am I getting reimbursed? I'm not getting reimbursed, but I don't expect to be.
Ask Aaron.
Oh, is that right?
Just I'll gamble with you, Kane, if you want.
Cover the cost of.
I've learned that food is the one thing I can't spend the kinds of money that I get, like my professional development money. Apparently, growing my stomach is not professional development.
You're a professional is developing something. How a rules lawyer at the university gets to some stuff, you figure you could argue for it.
Been there, tried, failed.
What if we all got it like March?
Go where? Go demand it.
That's.
That's how things change. That's how policies change, but the policy would have to change. Is anyone thrilled enough to want to go grab pizza with me at Costco on Friday?
I got something else to do. I'm gonna be there for hours, man.
Then Josh, he's the Costco guy.
I got Friday off so I could be at the event, so the college just happened.
That'd be so funny. Walk out with a bunch of pizzas. I rub it in your coworkers' faces.
You got the day off.
Anyone who wants to tag along will be able to do so. Other than that,
We get some shopping done.
I do have a membership.
Just let everybody.
I think I'm allowed 2 guests. If you don't have memberships, I think I'm allowed 2 guests with.
Don't worry, I have my own, so I'm good.
Like, one quick question, is it open notes or?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's the sheet of notes that you can bring. So
Like
you
sheet
get
of notes with
a
it?
sheet, front and back, and anything you want. I won't collect it.
I write a bunch of shit and then never use it.
Wasn't here, what did you guys talk about yesterday? Cause I wasn't there for it.
A good point. Did I upload that lecture? I don't think I uploaded things yesterday. I did it the day before. But I'll get those up after class so that you can look at them ahead of Friday.
Okay.
I should, no, actually, maybe I won't. I'm supposed to have a master student meeting and then an advising meeting. And we'll see what my memory is doing after that. If you're looking for lecture videos and they're not up at that point, send me a reminder.
Okay then.
I checked, they had magic cards at Costco.
Overpriced.
Oh, no. Freaking almost all those ones, all the commander decks that have a solar. The staples in there.
Yes.
Some of them have square foot boots.
If you wait about a year, usually you can get them packaged on Amazon for about 60% of their MSRP.
Gosh, you don't really want marked down. You get priced.
That's true too. I have not spent on Magic in a very long time.
I'm sure your
Never
wallet
too.
Yeah. Yeah, I always just bought collections. Never bought packaged material. I bought other people out of trying to get out of the game.